Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with part 13 of The Genius of Freemasonry by J.D. Buck. Freemasonry as a world power versus clericalism. We may now take a still larger view of the institution of Freemasonry, regarding it as one of two great world powers, influencing the progress of the human race and shaping the destiny of man, underlying the incidents of time, the rise and fall of empires, the waging of wars of conquest, the conflicts of political ambition. Back of all these, there lie two concepts by which rulers and those ambitious to rule mankind shape their policies towards the multitude. These concepts or principles seem basic in human nature and are readily classed as good and evil, selfishness and altruism. They are the two powers that forever contended for the mastery in the soul of man. One seeks all for self at the sacrifice of others. The other seeks to serve for the benefit of all. The one seeks to keep mankind in ignorance and slavery in order that it may live in ease, luxury, and profligacy. The other seeks to enlighten man and set him free in order that it may clasp his hands in fellowship and fraternity and call him comrade and brother. These two principles are hidden deep within the soul of man. They are ever in conflict, and they influence all political association and all institutions of man. In two instances, they have been definitely recognized, carefully formulated, precisely and deliberately acted upon for ages. Both have many imitators that more or less clearly conceive and act upon these opposing principles. These endure for a time and pass away, but the two great world powers endure. The following summary by Brother Mason is the most concise statement possible regarding these opposing principles and the two organizations that represent them and confront each other through the ages. From the dawn of civilization to the present moment, two active and opposing forces have been engaged in deadly conflict over the destiny of human intelligence. One of these has ever been the unflattering, courageous, and consistent champion of individual life, individual liberty, and individual happiness. The other has, with equal consistency and persistency, sought to dominate and control the life, intelligence, and conscience of the individual and subject him to intellectual bondage and servitude. The one has openly fostered the spirit of freedom and independence as a basic principle of individual and organic human life. The other has covertly sought to reduce the individual to the status of a mere instrument in the hands and under the domination and control of an aggregate organic will and design. The one has dignified and emphasized the individual intelligence and appreciated its value to both itself and society. The other has persistently ignored the great fundamental fact of nature, that the individual in his own right as such is invested with certain indefeasible attributes and certain inalienable rights, privileges, and benefits which must be respected. The one has recognized the fact that man's value to himself as an individual is the only sure and true measure of his value as an active, living factor in the society organism of which he is a part. The other has produced, as if upon the assumption that man has but one value, namely his value to the great aggregate body of which he is a part, and that his value, even in that capacity, is measured by the degree to which his individual will, intelligence, and conscience are subject to the domination and control of that aggregate body. The one develops individual intelligence, courage, and perseverance, and a sense of individual responsibility through the power and process of a broad and liberal education. The other commands obedience and subjection through the power of ignorance, superstition, and fear. At the very cradle of humanity, these two forces arrayed themselves in an irrepressible conflict. At that point, the struggle began. From that point forward, throughout all the subsequent ages, even to the present time, it has continued unabated. At no time within the limits of authentic history has the conflict reached a more critical stage than in this, the dawning of the 20th century. And who are the contending parties to this vital conflict? Broadly and abstractly speaking, they are light and darkness, truth and falsehood, construction and destruction, life and death, the widow's son and the ruffians. But more specifically and correctly, they are the two most powerful organic bodies of intelligence upon earth, together with the individual intelligences who have voluntarily arrayed themselves upon opposite sides of the two great principles involved in the struggle. But to what great organic bodies is reference here made? It is sufficient at this time to state that one is the great organic body of Masonry, together with the parent organization from which it received its noble inspiration to life, liberty, and happiness. It would be difficult to imagine and impossible to define a stronger contrast than is here drawn between the agencies of good and evil, light and darkness. If any one word is monumented in Masonry more than another, it is the word light. Every just and upright Mason is in a position to judge how far the foregoing references to good and light, liberty and fraternity apply to the institution of Freemasonry. They are embodied, preserved, and monumented in the ritual and work of the order from beginning to end. The author above quoted does not, at that point, designate the opposing organization. Can any Freemason familiar with the history of his order or of its trials and persecutions in the past be in any doubt as to the identity of the opposing institution referred to? It can be no other than organized clericalism or the Roman Catholic hierarchy. It is more than 1,500 years old. Its history is a trail of blood and relentless persecution of all its accredited enemies, among which it counts Masonry as first. It rests its claims to power on the dogmas of divine authority and obedience. It boasts that it never forgets an injury nor forgets an enemy. It is relentless and cruel. The principles of liberty, justice, equity, and fraternity outside its authority. It resents and repudiates. It curses Masonry for its secrecy, and yet itself the most secret and cunning of all known institutions of man. It could be distinctly understood and never for a moment forgotten that the Catholic hierarchy is a secular political institution, ambitious for power, and utterly unscrupulous in its methods of securing it. The end always justifies the means. This political machine shields itself under the so-called Christian religion, which it has sophisticated for its use. This so-called religion, therefore, furnishes a cloak under which the schemes and ambitions of the hierarchy can be continually disguised and safely and relentlessly pursued. No reference is herein had or designed regarding the average Catholic priest or the mass of communicants. These are for the most part ignorant of the political machine, though compelled under the dogma of blind obedience to further its schemes and ambitions. That there may be no misunderstanding and no debate at this point, the dogma of the papal infallibility was instituted. The Pope is the first and the last, the sole and last judge of the consciousness of men, as claimed by Archbishop Manning and by all papal representatives. Here, then, is the largest and most powerful organization that ever existed on this earth. secret, unscrupulous, ambitious to the last degree. It tramples on every individual right, ignores every human and fraternal obligation, and holds the masses in bondage through ignorance, superstition, and fear. Freemasonry is the only institution, the only world power that fully recognizes this enemy of man, this bar to freedom, progress, and evolution. Fortunately for mankind, the march of civilization, the trend of evolution, and the onward and upward progress of man are all against these monstrous claims and ambitions of clericalism. This gigantic Moloch here faces the lines of greatest resistance and works against both God and nature. Were it not so, the world long ago would have been helplessly and hopelessly in its clutches. The body of the church, however, outside the central hierarchical core, is torn down by dissension. In spite of all that a narrow, dogmatic, and superstitious education can do to deprive the thousands of young Catholics all over the world, both individual priests and some of the laity imbibe something of the real spirit of Christ and of the rights of conscience and of individual responsibility. Freemasonry is the worldwide and eternal enemy of all this modernized paganism. It stands everywhere and at all times for the opposite, the exact antithesis of all this. It stands for individual freedom and personal responsibility, for the rights of conscience and private judgment. It is, therefore, in line with and is the handmaid and helper of the uplift, the higher evolution of man. And if it be outnumbered 1,000 to 1 by the ambitious hierarchy of clericalism and their ignorant and superstitious hordes, it has right and justice, light and liberty, God and nature on its side. It is squarely aligned with human evolution and can never fail while God is in the heavens. While law exists and nature, progress, and civilization are possible to man, provided he adheres to its principles, preserves its landmarks, and every brother exemplifies these principles in his own life and does his duty. The principal activities of Masonry today in this country consist in the reception and initiation of candidates, and in such business meetings and transactions as seem necessary for the preservation and government of the lodge. If wise precaution and just discrimination are exercised in the admission of candidates, so that only those who are duly prepared and fully worthy and qualified are admitted, then this growth and steady increase in members of the fraternity is wise and beneficent. But if this increase in numbers is all there is to do the work of Masonry, if this great body of good and true men do not realize the work and for the world whereunto they are ordained and set apart, if they do not array themselves everywhere and at all times on the side of justice, equity, and right, liberty and fraternity, regardless of party politics and all other considerations, if they are not watchful of the constant encroachments of the hereditary enemy upon our liberties, our free schools, and all our democratic institutions, then this institution of Freemasonry ceases to be a world power and degenerates into a fad, a mere pretense. With God, nature, liberty, progress, and evolution on its side, and light as its beacon star, this world power may take the lead in all progress and do more than all other influences combined towards constructive liberty and the upward march of man. The highest good of the individual will thus secure permanent benefits and the greatest good of all. If the welfare of the individual were essentially antagonistic to that of the state, then God and nature and man would be essentially at cross purposes, and progress and evolution would be impossible. Huxley declared the object of all science to be the discernment of the rational order that pervades the universe. This is the meaning of law and the foundation of justice. Whenever man discerns this rational order and builds upon it, his foundation is sure and his work enduring and beneficent. The greatest reproach that can be brought against Masons today is that they seem ignorant of and indifferent to these great principles of the order. If they could but realize their privileges and awaken to their real obligations as one man, they could transform this experiment in self-government into an ideal republic and constitute a world power hitherto unknown on any such scale in the history of the human race. The time is near at hand when every Mason, as every free man, will have to define his position on these monumentous issues. The progress of scientific discovery, the arts, manufacture, commerce, and means of transportation and communication have developed so rapidly as to draw all parts of the earth and sections of the habitable globe nearer together. War has become so destructive that it will have to cease, or civilization must perish. In the meantime, the rapid increase and enormous accumulation of wealth have intensified the struggle between the wage earner and the capitalist, so that intestine strife is as imminent as hitherto that between nations or political parties has been. The aggregate population in cities as compared with rural districts has increased enormously and is rapidly increasing. These issues are imminent, and strife is engendered in the interest of power at the expense and in defiance of justice. The recognitions of the principles of equity and justice based on the principles of mutual interest and mutual needs can alone prevent collusion or maintain peace and prosperity. Capital is accumulated and massed as an engine of power and used to exploit and oppress the poor and the producer. Labor organizes and retaliates. These powers are equal, however dissimilar they may be. Neither can exist without the other, and yet they may destroy each other. If they would but cooperate frankly and honestly, they might secure mutual advantages and avoid all the waste and the dangers of strife. The principles of Freemasonry aim at precisely this fraternal cooperation between individuals and corporate bodies everywhere. Every Masonic lodge is a peace conference, where arms and ammunition are forever laid aside, and where he who is master is the servant of all. I trust that the time may never come when Masonry as an organized body shall appear in the arena of the world's politics or seek political power. This is a condition almost inconceivable and entirely foreign to the real genius of the order. It is inconceivable for the reason that all parties are likely to be represented in the lodge, and the dominance of a majority would not carry but split the lodge. The same may be said of the predominance of any sect or religious order or organization. Too much prominence already has been given in certain quarters to symbols and ceremonies of the Christian religion. Any doctrine, symbol, or ceremony that could any way be offensive or exclusive to a Jew or a Parsi is just, so far, un-Masonic. No real world power with the claim of justice can be exclusive. It must be inclusive and not dogmatic. Clericalism is, indeed, a world power, and it is ambitious to be at the same time inclusive, exclusive, dogmatic, and intolerant. It would include all peoples, races, and religions, provided they would drop all other obedience and conform to the dogmas and yield to the authority of the Roman Catholic hierarchy. The Church does not affiliate. It proposes to stand alone and supreme and to absorb all other organizations. It appeals to no principle of justice or equity. The thunders of the Vatican are proverbial. They are dogmatic, unreasoning, autocratic, and insolent. They seek power in free America for the sole purpose of making America Catholic. God wills it, declares Archbishop Ireland. Here, then, is a world power seeking dominion, declaring openly its motive but concealing its methods. These methods are monumented in torture, persecution, and blood on every page of the world's history. Masonry is a world power, not through ambition to rule, not through organizing and exploiting the ignorant that it may degrade and oppress them, but through its educational influence on the individual, through its transcendency of character over creed, of justice over oppression, and through its fraternal influence on the whole human race. It is not ambitious for numbers, regarding as it does a few selected good men and true, who are ready to do their whole duty as men and brothers, as the conservators of society and exemplars to the world. Need any intelligent man be in no doubt as to which of these two world powers floats the banner, peace on earth and goodwill to man. It is a folly for any Mason to ignore or deny this plain issue, or seek to evade it. Let clericalism continue to gain power in free America for another decade as in the past by the amassing of wealth, increasing and organizing its voters, and consolidating and drilling its Catholic knights. And it will be in position to issue its decrees and make its own terms. It is simply imbecile to ignore or deny it. The supine indifference of many otherwise good Masons simply fortifies the power of clericalism and gives it an easy victory. The outcry of papacy against Masons in France shows that it knows where to locate and how to curse its hereditary enemy. Whenever and wherever Roman clericalism has had political power or sufficient political influence, it has imprisoned and tortured and killed Masons and done its utmost to crush out and destroy Masonry. Now that it has but little direct political influence, it works in secret for the same end, and by Jesuitry and secret cunning seeks to accomplish the same purpose with the same hope, through amassed wealth and the control of all Catholic votes, of ultimately regaining political power. No one need be in the least doubt as to how that political power, however gained, would be used. Roman Catholicism, whenever acting as a political ecclesiastical organization, proposes to vote as a unit. This is a standing menace to Republican government. Listen to Pope Pius IX in his syllabus, December 8, 1864. She, meaning the Church, has the right to execute her power without the permission or consent of the state. She has the right to require that the Catholic religion shall be the only religion of the state, to the exclusion of all others. In his encyclical of December 1892, the Pope says, "Permit us then, in addressing you, to point to Masonry as an enemy at once of God, the Church, and our country. Since we are dealing with a sect which has spread itself everywhere, it is not enough to be on the defensive towards it, but we must go courageously into the arena and meet it, as you will do, dear children, by opposing press to press, school to school, association to association, Congress to Congress, action to action." Read the whole encyclical in Facing the 20th Century and see if there could be any mystery in the consolidation of the Knights of Columbus all over the world, or the recent convocation of 600 Jesuits in Chicago with doors closed except to the sons of Yoloya, or the announced gathering of 1.5 million of representatives of Catholic societies in St. Louis in July of this year. The Freemason who is indifferent to these things, or who simply poo-poos them, had better begin with the alphabet of Masonry and see if he cannot gain a little more light. Or does he prefer to wait till the gun goes off and then say he didn't know it was loaded? It is his business to know it now, and so curb blind fanaticism and prevent disaster. The interests of Freemasonry are bound up with the interest of light and progress in this republic. The enemy of one is the avowed enemy of both. A traitor to one is a traitor to the other, because they both spring from the same source, are based upon the same principles, aim at the same results, viz., liberty against despotism, light against darkness, progress against paganism, ignorance and superstition, courage against fear and degeneracy. We hear the boast everywhere today that these United States are a world power. If this be true, this power lies not in our Navy or our standing army or in our physical, agricultural, or financial resources alone. Though the governments of the world would hesitate in defying all these, the real power lies in the principles of justice, equity, freedom, and fraternity upon which this government was founded. If our starry banner means less than this, or deliberately ignores or forgets these principles, then is it a pretense deserving only to be trailed in the dust? We honor it, and the world respects it for what it represents. The hands of Freemasons placed these eternal principles at the very foundation of this republic and proceeded to pledge to them their life, their liberty, and their sacred honor. Many of them sealed the compact with blood. These United States today are a world power because Masonic principles lie at their foundation. Masonry is a world power because of these same principles. The principles are the same whether advocated and adhered to by one man or by 70 million men. Numbers and navies and standing armies do not create principles, nor make right wrong. Principles are eternal and are unchanging as fate. And the nations that forget justice, equity, and right die. So perished the civilization of Egypt, and so perish all the nations that forgot God, for God is justice and light. The intelligence of mankind has evolved too far for the continued dominance of ignorance, superstition, and fear. The policy of Roman clericalism was evolved in the Dark Ages. Its boast is that it is infallible and never changes. Every step in the onward and upward march of the human race weakens its hold by freeing from superstition its adherents. From open and aggressive warfare has it turned to secrecy, cunning, and fraud to gain its ends. It seeks to control the education of the young in order to instill into them the dogma of authority and obedience. It protests against freedom and the rights of conscience, the very basis of character and personal responsibility. And this it does in the name of what it calls religion. It is now making its supreme struggle to retain its prestige and power in this country through massing and controlling votes and the accumulation of wealth. It thus debauches the very freedom which America offers to the world. If any Masonic brother doubts the existence of such a religico-political scheme on the part of the Roman Catholic clerics, let him read carefully Facing the 20th Century by James M. King, published by Jennings and Fry. That this body of scheming priests in Rome can accomplish all this in free America, only they, debauched by arrogance, pride, and ambition, could ever imagine, but that this is their effort, aim, and ambition, to make America Catholic. They have declared openly over and over again, and when with confidence through organization, votes, and wealth, they think they can win, or their real purpose can be no longer concealed from an awakened people, then resistance will mean strife and bloodshed. If every just and upright Mason will awake and do his duty, these political religious schemers will realize here, as they have in France, that their ambitions are vain and their political power at an end. I am not seeking to excite hostility. I am urging the prevention of civil war and fraternal strife. When this strife is over, if come it must, the secret, cunning Jesuit will be banished from America as he has been from almost every other country on the earth. The freedom which he has only abused will be no longer his. He will be recognized as a traitor to all our free institutions and sent back to that muck heap of the Roman pontiffs, whence he sprang. America will never be governed by a lot of monks in petticoats from the Roman Vatican, whatever it may cost to loosen their clutch and reduce them to the rank of aliens and traitors. They would have no power at the present time had they not sophisticated and then exploited the religion of Jesus, and under the pretense of religion carried on their political schemes. To expose the utter falsehood of their so-called religion is to defeat their political schemes. There are probably few Masonic lodges in our great cities to which the Jesuit does not gain admission. Secret and cunning, and regarding no oath nor obligation as binding outside his order, and absolved in advance under the Juridical doctrine that the end justifies the mean. He reports to his superiors those secrets he so loudly condemns. There are also few, if any, of the daily newspapers that are not under boycott to exclude anything inimical to the interest of clericalism. It is thus that this dark world power has apparently everything its own way. It will find in the denouncement that it has reckoned without its host, and will be held responsible for the consequences. Thank you for watching. And please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. If you can, please consider donating towards the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.